Hi, I'm Raylyn Worcester, and this is Spreading the Word. That's word with a capital W, as in the written word, the Bible, and the Word made flesh, Jesus Christ. I'm going to be reading to you today from Fifth Times the Charm. This is the story of one woman's life through 5 marriages, where she discovers what works, what doesn't, and what makes the difference. When we left off, the woman in this story had just ended her first marriage to Brad. Now, the part I'm going to read is called Hiatus, and that is the period between the first time and the second time. How does she get from the end of one marriage to the point where she's ready to marry again? That's what we're going to find out. So grab something to drink, make yourself comfortable. I'm about to read Fifth Times the Charm, Hiatus between first and second. It was 1981. She was 21 years old and on her own for the first time in her life. She was in heaven. She'd felt trapped and tied down for the past 3 years, and now she just wanted to live and experience everything. Her previous desire, need for God, had been crushed by the weight of her marriage into a tiny ball in the corner of her soul. It was still there. It just wasn't priority. It lay dormant until a time she would remember it again and nurture it into abundant life. But that time wasn't now. Her job at the new dealership was so much different than it had been at the previous. That first job had been her introduction to a world outside of Brad and his destructive proclivities. It took on an aura of reverence in her mind, something to be treasured and appreciated and protected. There she met people who appreciated her for her abilities, work ethic, personality, and, well, for her. There she met Grady. A tear slipped as she thought of the one that got away. He was the first person she'd ever been attracted to, connected with on a deeper level, felt comfortable with, loved. Oh well, enough of that. This new job was different in every way. Here she worked in the service department, figuring up the invoices for work done on vehicles and collecting the money from customers before handing them their keys. She was in an office with 2 other girls, and they quickly struck up an easy friendship. Here, all the single girls flirted with all the single guys. It was fun and harmless. She loved it. All the stress of her marriage had melted away the extra pounds pregnancy had brought, and now she had a cute, proportionate figure with the full bosom created by motherhood, a now tiny waist, and curvy childbearing hips. She wore her long hair in bouncy curls, reminiscent of Jacqueline Smith on Charlie's Angels, and her glasses had been permanently replaced by contact lenses. Here she received lots of attention, albeit the wrong kind, but she didn't care. It was nice to have the focus on her for a change. She ate it up. With the finalization of the divorce came conditions in the divorce decree. Brad had to pay $140 a month child support, which helped, but in exchange received visitation rights. Every Friday he would pick Jennifer up from Margie's after work, keep her for the weekend, and return her to Margie's Monday morning on his way to work. It was the perfect solution. He got his visitation and she got her weekends free, and all without having to see or speak to Brad. This arrangement seemed to work well for the next 2 years. She never asked Jennifer how her weekends with her dad had gone. She was too wrapped up in her newfound freedom to give it much thought. There were so many things she wanted to do with this free time. She figured life for a 1 to 3-year-old would be pretty much the same, regardless where she spent it. This ignorance was not bliss. She would discover in the not too distant future. Her lack of interest in this part of her daughter's life would end up being her biggest regret. But that is a different story, and it wasn't hers to tell. Weekend freedom came at a cost. The girls in the office liked to go see the Chippendales on Friday nights, and of course, she was right there with them. The male dancers danced, gyrated, and flirted in skimpy outfits for their dollar bills. She never took less than 20 of them, and often that felt too few. Then there was the cover charge and drinks, and well, all that added up. And that was only Friday. Saturdays were spent with friends at barbecues, picnics, drinking and partying too. Sundays were spent nursing hangovers and getting enough rest for work on Monday. The work week was a different story. She never drank during the week. Though the atmosphere at the dealership was fun, friendly, and relaxed, she took her job seriously. Business was business. Her life took on two different personas, the work week and the weekend. She enjoyed them both equally. A few months into her job at the new dealership, she noticed a card on the bulletin board in the break room. There was a girl her age who had just moved to the area and was looking for someone to room with. This was something to consider. Her weekend activities had been taking a healthy bite out of her budget, causing her to cut back on groceries and pay bills a few days late at times. A roommate sharing rent could change all that. She decided to give her a call. Rochelle was a free spirit. She talked loud and laughed easily and had no filter. She lived a large life. She took to Jennifer right away, and that more than anything made the decision easy. The complex had a 2-bedroom apartment available, and they would only need to pay the difference in rent to move in. Rochelle paid that, and the two women would split the rent and utilities in half for each month thereafter. Rochelle took the smaller bedroom, and she and Jennifer shared the larger. It seemed the perfect arrangement. Both women soon discovered that Rochelle was a bit too wild and irresponsible, and though she was enjoying her newfound freedom on the weekends, her roommate was still too stilted and reserved. They agreed that she would settle Rochelle down some, and in return Rochelle would loosen her up some. Both women agreed that there would be no partying during the week, and both would work during the day, play with Jennifer, and watch movies or play games in the evenings. Then all hell could break loose on the weekends. This, too, seemed to work for a time. To this point in her life, she had never done any drugs. She had no desire to. Rochelle, on the other hand, had started smoking pot at age 12, and her mother was her supplier. The two of them often partied together and were more like girlfriends than mother and daughter. The rule was made that if Rochelle wanted to use drugs, she could never do it around Jennifer, and they could never be visible in the house. It had to be as if they didn't exist. Rochelle shrugged and agreed in her easy way. No biggie. Nothing ever was. The day came when she was particularly agitated over something that wasn't going right, when Rochelle told her she needed to chill. It was a Saturday morning and Jennifer was with her dad. So when Rochelle pulled out a joint and offered her a hit, she decided, what the hell? She wanted to live a little and experience new things, and one hit shouldn't hurt, should it? Almost immediately she started to relax, or wasn't mellow out. By the time the two of them finished the joint, she couldn't even remember what she'd been upset about. Over the next few months, life took on a routine of calm family, home life, and work during the week, and nightclubs and partying on the weekends. During this time, she smoked some pot on the weekends, tried coke a couple of times, but decided she didn't like it. She dropped acid once, and the experience frightened her so badly that she decided to quit drugging altogether. She would stick to wine coolers or jungle juice. It was one of the wisest decisions she had ever made. Rochelle had been living with them for about a year when she came into her room and trying to shut her jeans over a puffy tummy that wouldn't allow the snap to snap, said, "Oh, shit." She knew she was pregnant long before a test would confirm it. She'd been there before, twice. She'd had 2 abortions before she was 18 years old, and now she was planning to have another. Her mother made the appointment, paid the fee, and would take her to have the procedure done. It was no biggie. They'd done it before. It came with their chosen lifestyle. This time, though, things didn't go smoothly. She had a lot of scar tissue that created complications. Rochelle had lost a lot of blood and needed to be on bed rest for a couple of weeks. Her boss had no compassion or tolerance for Rochelle and her bohemian ways. He fired her the first day she missed work. Suddenly, life was no longer a fun adventure. She now had an almost 3-year-old and a roommate to support. All the rent on the more expensive 2-bedroom apartment and expenses fell on her shoulders. She asked for extra hours at work, and Saturdays were now spent working instead of playing. Still, the expenses exceeded the income, and she skimped on groceries. She always made sure Jennifer had plenty to eat, but she often went days without a meal, sufficing with a spoon of peanut butter when her tummy growled too loudly. She thought about going to her mom for help, but rejected the idea almost immediately. She'd made her bed. Now she had to lie in it. One thing that worked to her favor was her youthful good looks. They attracted the attention of men who wanted to date her. She had no desire to get into another relationship, but the thought of a steak dinner in a nice restaurant was very appealing. So on the weekends, she dated anyone who would buy her a meal. And if they wanted sex in exchange, she figured that was only fair. She couldn't sustain this arrangement very long, though. The guilt and shame of what she was doing was almost unbearable. How had she gotten here? What had she become? Rochelle healed but was having trouble finding a job. Word had gotten out about her wild and unreliable ways. The apartment complex raised all the rents. Bills were due, and her available funds didn't stretch far enough to pay them all. Groceries were scarce. She couldn't bring herself to date for meals any longer. Depression set in. In desperation, she cried out, "Oh, God, what am I going to do?" And she heard a still small voice in her spirit say, "Fear not, I am here. I will never leave you nor forsake you." She put her head in her hands and wept. When she was spent, she said, "What do you want me to do?" "Trust me," the answer came. "I have a plan for you." And with that little spark of hope, depression had to flee. Not long after that, she was at work one day when a man came to her window and asked for his bill and keys. It had been one of the invoices her coworker had worked on, and she had not seen it until that moment. She looked at the name on the bill and then at the face of the man making the request. "Grady? Grady!" She nearly screamed. She put down the invoice, ran out the door, around the corner, into the waiting room, and flung herself into Grady's arms. He laughed, hugged her back, and gently pushed her away. "Is it really you?" she asked. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here to see you," he responded. "They told me at the dealership where we worked that you'd transferred here. I figured I'd kill two birds with one stone and get my oil changed while I was here." She hugged him again, unable to believe he was actually here and that he'd hunted her down. He told her he'd wait until she got off work and take her out for a bite to eat. She went back into the office, settled his bill, and handed him his keys. He took a seat in the waiting room, and she called Rochelle and asked her if she would pick up Jennifer. She had a date. Rochelle eagerly complied. Over dinner, Grady shared that he'd been working in construction with his brother. "Well, that explains the tan and how muscular his arms have gotten," she thought. He was making good money and was relatively happy. The only thing missing in his life was her, he shared. He came back to see if she ever left that jerk of a husband. "Nearly 2 years ago now," she said. "Then I'd like you to come to Missouri with me and marry me," he answered. She sat in a state of shock for a moment. "You know that Jennifer and I are a package deal, right?" she asked. "I wouldn't take you without her," he answered. It was the perfect response. She had never loved him more. She told Grady she would need to give Rochelle a month's notice to either find a roommate or another place to live. She had to give her boss at work at least 2 weeks' notice before quitting her job. She'd need to stop the utilities and buy suitcases, and he laughed and pulled her into his arms. "I need to be back at work on Monday. Take this cash." He stuffed a wad of bills into her hands. "And get everything paid off and buy the things you need. I will send you a plane ticket to join me 1 month from today." She looked at Grady with love and gratitude. "I believe God sent you here to me today," she said. "I think so too," he answered. And that concludes Hiatus, between first time and second time. If you are enjoying the story, stick around for second time and find out what happens with our star of our story and Grady. You won't want to miss it. Remember to like, subscribe, and share, and in this way you can help spread the word. Thank you. God bless.